Hello and welcome to the first Imperator Productions video on our Art and History channel. In this video, I'd like to go into a little detail on exactly how and why these videos are going to be made. In this series, we'll be looking at two huge ideas, art and history. To start, I suppose we should take a look at what exactly we mean by art and history. These are two words we use every day, but the meanings can vary, and art's more difficult to pin down. So, without further ado, what do we mean by art? Maybe you've heard someone say something like, everything is art. Maybe you've heard the opposite, nothing is art. Maybe you believe in humanism, or postmodernism, or post-postmodernism, or some other perspective. I'm not here to tell anybody that their definition of art is wrong, but for the purposes of this channel, we're going to have to rely on as simple a definition as possible. So then, what is art? Whether painting, sculpture, architecture, writing, music, all art have a very similar starting point. That is, one person trying to express their perspective. Whether that perspective is love or pain, fear or joy, tragedy or comedy, crystal clear or indecipherable, is all up to the artist. How they choose to tell their story, the medium, the intended audience, all of these factors are subject to the individual creator. As society develops, blossoms, and dies, the available perspectives to artists so too develop, blossom, and die. As we will see, the artistic media, the standards of beauty, and many other important factors all developed explosively when those with perspectives that were on the fringe pushed ever further, whether for better or for worse. So why does this matter? Why should you care about perspective or how art developed over time? What exactly does this mean for me, right? To answer this, we first need to briefly look at what I mean when I say history. Now, we all know what history is, the story of humanity from the inception of record-keeping to today. But history is also so much more and less than the literal telling of humanity's past. Why is this? First, record-keeping isn't perfect, and a lot of knowledge is lost forever. We'll never know the primary accounts of Alexander the Great, the bulk of the works of Cicero, and one of the most influential nations in history, Byzantine Rome, is but a former shadow of itself because of the cataclysmic times that they lived in. So, more than just a story, history is something major to tell us, how the people that got us here lived. On top of that, history most accurately represents the nations that were comparatively successful based against the other nations and groups of their time. That is to say, history is the story of triumph over failure, of order over chaos, of progression over regression, for the most part. The transition from pictorial to character methods of writing, from agriculture-dominated society to mixed labor, from slavery to industry, all of these transitions were absolutely necessary for the development and progression of modern society. And here's where the two meet, art and history. It is sad but true to say that ancient Sumeria, Egypt, Mesopotamia, none of these produced a single record condemning slavery as an institution. Neither did ancient Greece or Rome or Persia. In fact, there is no ancient urbanized civilization that condemns slavery as an institution, or even really a nomad culture. Slaves would revolt if they were pushed too far, but when they did, they usually wanted to become free men so that they could own their own slaves, rather than fighting against the moral or ethical dilemma of keeping people in bondage. And yet, in the conflagration of Enlightenment in early modern times, slavery was abandoned, hunted down, and prosecuted. How did we get there? People have been around for millennia, and slavery existed before record keeping. Abolishing slavery would have sounded as far-fetched to an ancient Roman as abolishing farming or hunting. Without the abolition of slavery, mechanization in industry would surely have been stifled to an alarming degree. Ancient Rome had industry in ceramics manufacturers, armories, stone quarries, and other large-scale operations. Some scholars even suppose the Golden Age Rome had the knowledge necessary to make steamworks, but such inventions just weren't viable in a society with such a dominant slave culture. Even if a refined steam engine could have replaced slaves, such as those on the old Roman elevators, no one who had the resources to invest would have thought it was a good idea. To those with wealth, this would have damaged the value of their property. And to those without wealth, well, they were dreaming of being the aristocrat in the castle with all of the slaves around them. No one had the perspective yet that slavery was immoral, so society just didn't see it that way. Rome, to the end, never saw the enormous damage done by slavery. The people broken, the nations destroyed, history lost. Even more prescient, however, is the realization that slavery doomed Rome from the very beginning. Slave rebellions happened by the decade, and any impending invasion could look to subvert up to a third of the city's population through negotiations with the slaves there. The failure of Roman society to recognize slavery as a massive failure cost them an innovation, lives, resources, and possibly their very existence. Society was much more rigid back then, as we will even see in their art. This rigidity may have come from having little previous history to go off of, living in a far less hospitable world, or from elites who garnered power through rigid societal structures and norms. So again, why does art and history matter? Through the telling of the development of art and history, we can look at how individuals saw themselves, their cultures, their worlds. We can look at change in perspective in art and the change in perspective in those making art as it relates to the overall changes taking place in their society. And most importantly, to change the world, you need to understand how it's been done in the past. Change is inevitable. The only decision is whether to progress or regress. So thank you very much for watching the whole video. In the future, I'm going to actually be doing these videos. I just wanted to have one kind of setting the stage. This was a very structured video. I had just about everything written down that I wanted to say so that I didn't ramble too far. I wanted to have sort of a clarification so that if you stumbled on one of the later videos, you can understand where I was coming from and how these all relate to each other. I'm going to be doing one from each individual period and then kind of going back just to sort of keep it fresh and to show how the different cultures and societies and art movements relate to one another. So there's still thousands of years left to cover. I hope to see you all again very soon. Until then, remember, Ab Imperator!